To begin to learn about the civilizations in Latin America, we first need to understand the history behind where it all began. The Olmecs were the earliest known major civilization in Mexico. They lived in the tropical lowlands of south central Mexico in the present day states of Veracruz and Tabasco, just like the hot sauce. They were the first Mesoamerican civilization and laid many of the foundations for the civilization that followed, such as the spread of agriculture in 2000 BCE. The Olmecs weren't like their neighboring counterparts in the Eastern Hemisphere, considering they didn't keep as many animals, but eventually they domesticated small animals such as turkeys and barkless dogs. Who would have guessed that eating small turkeys and dogs wouldn't actually satisfy them? This basically meant that they had to find a new source of energy. It is important to know that the Olmecs were hunter-gatherers. This encouraged them to take part in the slash and burn method. Later, they realized that they could grow food from soil, water, and seeds. They mostly planted pumpkin, pepper, squash, beans, and famously corn, also known as maize. The rich farming materials granted them long life. This led to the cultivation of throwing out your backs and sweating bullets, also known as human labor. Toward the end of the second millennium BCE, Mesoamericans lived off to lead to the establishment of ceremonial centers such as pyramids, temples, and palaces. The first centers were designed more along the lines of catering to the ruling elites, priests, artisans, and craftsmen. They hosted special occasions to observe ritual bloodletting, a hallmark of nearly all subsequent Mesoamerican societies, and exchanging of goods such as maize on market days. The first accounted ceremonial center came about in 1200 BCE in present-day San Lorenzo. This served for some 400 years. The ceremonial centers like these define the life of the Olmec people and is the heart of the society. The rainfall was abundant and the cultivation of elaborate drainage systems to divert the waters that could very well help flood them. Some of the water systems can even be seen today. So, like most things in history, the complete truth can't be told because there isn't sufficient evidence. So, the case is the same here, but what we can recollect is quite interesting. So, their society was most likely authoritarian, favoring or enforcing strict obedience to authority, especially that of the government, if you didn't know, considering that many laborers worked on the ceremonial centers and that portions of their food were given to the richer elites. Building upon their undying service to the elites, the common Olmec people consistently built pieces of artworks and became known familiar for it, particularly an aptly named colossal heads, which stood almost 10 feet tall, which is basically equivalent to one Mr. Markov and one Daniela combined. The Olmecs' influence spread by their military force because, like I said, authoritarian society, but mainly due to their trade. Most of their decorative objects and artwork were from imports of jade and exports of obsidian, knives, and axes. In return, they traded goods such as jade, salt, animal skins, ceramics, and small works of art. So the decline of the Olmec society isn't certain exactly. They were somehow in some way destroyed their ceremonial centers that the slaving common citizens built and then just up and deserted them. Sounds familiar? Yeah. Archaeologists have even found evidence of statues broken and buried, monuments defaced, and capitals burned. So there has to be something that they were trying to hide, in my opinion. Or maybe they were just a little out of it? Although, like many other civilizations declined due to foreign invaders, no other civilization was like the Olmecs. They deliberately destroyed their capitals, maybe because of civil conflicts or doubts of the effectiveness of their political legitimacy, or maybe to piss off their mothers. Who really knows? But my guess seems most reasonable. Now we're going to talk about the Maya civilization. After thousands of years that followed the decline of the Olmecs around 100 BCE, complex societies began to make a comeback in Mesoamerica, and populations exploded. Soon these societies began to seize control of the Olmec trade routes. Methods of long-distance trade linked the new urban centers with their counterparts in Mesoamerica, enforcing cultural influence. Within the newly built cities, priests made an effort to invent a writing language, basically meaning that they were similar to their counterparts in the Eastern Hemisphere. The Mayans were located in the Andean Mountains, now occupied by southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. But the most popular of the permanent villages they made was Camínjula. This city contained a ceremonial center, not a true city. Somehow, in some way, they found a way to rebuild, guys. Unlike the Olmecs, the Maya flourished in the poorly drained lowlands of Mesoamerica, which contributed to their quick loss of fertility. To enhance the agriculture that they relied so heavily on, they designed terraces to help retain the soil. They harvested maize, cotton, and cocoa. Yeah, like the chocolate. From 300 to 900 CE, the Mayans built around 80 ceremonial centers. Among them, Tikal was one of the most important and abundant, as it was approaching nearly 50,000 citizens. The Maya kingdoms constantly fought with each other. Mayan weapons did not utilize metals. They were often wooden clubs, some of which they would embed with razor-sharp chips of obsidian. This was ideal for maiming enemies by blows to the arms or legs. The non-lethal nature of such wounds allowed them to take live prisoners, many of which were needed for ritualistic sacrifices. Some scholars believe warfare was common among the Mayans, and there is evidence. Their warfare wasn't even like typical warfare, like kill the enemy. It was literally a game of who could bring back the most important captive and keep them alive for years, displaying them as trophies. Sounds like some next level deer hunting to me. The state of Chichen Itza was the only one with the pants in their hostile relationship. They sought out to integrate the prisoner captives rather than let them sit and rot. Although some captives possessed the dire need to die for their country that wasn't even coming back to save them, declining the Chichen Itza's offer, they made an effort, which is an A in my book.